To kick off this series on extended body flies, we're gonna go way back, all the way back to the original, which is tying on monofilament. So let's define an extended body fly. So when you're tying a fly, you got your hook shank and all the materials are stacked onto that hook shank. So then you are limited in how long a fly can be by the length of the materials, right? And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take another material. In this case, we're gonna start with monofilament, but we're gonna progress to tubes as well as shanks. So you have these different options as far as how you rig them, but you're going to dress that with material, and then you're going to extend the shank of the fly for which material is adhered to make the fly longer. So you can take 4-inch bucktail and make a 7-inch bucktail deceiver. So to start tying on mono, you're going to want something called a mono straight. This is monofilament that has all the memory removed. It holds perfectly straight. Apparently this is pretty common on the East Coast, but the specific product you're looking for is called Perlon Hard Monofilament Leader Material. Typically comes in 4 sizes, 30, 40, 50, 60, and you can make this yourself. What you want is a hard-coated, abrasion-resistant monofilament. I have a video on how to make these, by the way, but all you basically do is pack it into a tube, typically like a pen case or a little piece of PVC, anything like that, that's going to hold them straight. You boil it to align all the molecules, and then you shock it with cold water, and it'll stick out perfectly straight. So you can make it yourself, or you can get the commercially available option. The other thing you're going to need, we're going to tie with Danville fine monofilament tying thread. This happens to be 6/1000 of an inch diameter monofilament. I'm going to have a fairly light bobbin because you're going to be whipping this thing around the mono. You don't want a super heavy bobbin, you'll probably break your thread. So I mentioned that there's like 4 different pound classes to the monofilament. Simple recommendation, start heavy. It's going to be stiffer, it's going to be more forgiving to learn on, but then try to drop it down a little bit. I think 50 and 40 are kind of like my 2 favorite sizes. 30 is a little light, but it's also perfect for making the split mono rig for the swim bait hook. So they're all fairly useful, but I don't really use 60 anymore except for learning how to do this process. So I got my hard mono in hand, going to take my thread, just lightly get some thread turns on there and start trapping that down under my thread. Now right now my bobbin is completely normal. It's set to my normal standards, right? I just have the tension on the spool provided by the spring tension in these little ears. Now you don't want that because right now it's fairly light, and if I make a big arc and I go really hard, it's gonna slip out, right? This has too much force on it as it's going around that, that arc, and it's gonna pull out thread. You want that thread locked in place. So I'm gonna pull this down, and I'm gonna put wraps around my bobbin arm. I'm gonna use between 1 and 2 depending on just how tight this fits. You don't want it to be so tight that it adds friction to the mono and it breaks every once in a while. You don't want that. You just wanna make sure it's locked in place. So now I have just 1 turn around my bobbin leg to increase the friction so that I can go around with good tension and it's not going to slip. Now there's only 2 things that are fairly technical that need to be practiced. One is making sure that as that bobbin goes around, it's going around vertically. What you don't want is like this kind of askew bobbin path. You don't really want that, especially when you're trapping down materials. You want it to be nice and vertical. Keep it vertical, keep it vertical. Now if it stays vertical, you might ask yourself, how do I progress up and down? So then the way you progress the thread down and back is the hand that you're going towards is literally going to push the mono. The hand that is kind of supporting the mono is just going to make a light cone, and you'll be able to progress it forward. So you're going to slip out the thread, right? Because it should be tight enough it won't slip while you're spinning it. You're going to give it a gentle rock. This is going to make sure you can keep it perpendicular. As you start to go around, my fingers got closer. My left hand pushed the mono through my right hand, and I was able to progress forward down the monofilament. So that thread base is going all the way down for as long as you want it to be, and then all the way back to where you started. And all the while you're focusing on this gentle rock to get a perpendicular bobbin path so that your bobbin's not going wonky at a 45-degree angle. And you're practicing pushing and pulling with your fingers to control how the thread stacks up. Now right here, you do got to be fairly adept at whip finishing with your fingers. So you're going to get that thread on there and do like a 3-turn finish on that mono. Now this monofilament is featureless, right? There's no bend, there's no point, there's no hook eye, and so it's really hard to kind of gauge how much space you're eating up or how much space you're putting between the stacks. And to me, the thing that makes the hard mono extensions superior to everything else is your ability to have 100% consistent control over the spacing, because there's no hook eyes, there's no R-bends, there's no tube joints, there's nothing. It's just straight up mono. So you can make it perfect. So what you want to do is you want to give yourself some reference points. So you're going to take a piece of paper and you're just going to put 1/2 inch spacing on these dots. And then you're going to mark the monofilament with a permanent marker so that you have a way to gauge how much spacing is between your stacks. Now something I do different than Popovic's is I actually put the markings on my monofilament before I put any glue on here. And the reason why is I want the markings underneath the glue so I don't rub them off while I'm manipulating this, which is what happened like the first 2 or 3 times I did it. Might have been my marker choice, but either way, if you do the marker nice and light, you do the glue just as much as you need and you're fairly careful, you won't get any running whatsoever and you'll be able to see everything, and then the marker will be under the glue so you can't rub it off. My head was getting too warm. Now just check this, make sure you don't glue your hands to this stuff. But once that glue's dried, we're going to be ready to start our thread. Now something I do that's I find fairly silly is I tie this backwards. Like if this was in my if this was a shank in my vise, you think I would start down here and my bucktail would all be going towards the tail and I'd progress my way forward. But for whatever reason, the first time I ever did this, I stacked this side pointing off in front of me as if I was tying left-handed. And that's the way I've always done it. So just do whatever feels comfortable. I mean, it doesn't matter, but I find it really entertaining to myself that I do this backwards. Now start your thread on there. Remember, I still have it wrapped one time around my bobbin leg to increase the tension on it so that I can put down a thread base. Once you get that tag end trapped down, trim that off. Now you can still use controlling wraps like this as you normally would for fly tying, and what you're going to use is you're still going to use your vise, and the purpose of the vise is to just hold it out of the way so that you can manipulate your materials. Now I'm going to come in with some average bucktail. This is some like 4-inch hair, 4.5-inch hair. It's not crazy premium, and that's what makes extended body flies so cool. This is the tail that I processed myself with my buddy John. If you want to know how to do this, I have a video link in our little tutorial series that we're working on for techniques. So go check that out. I'm just going to take a pinch from about the same spot on the tail because we're going to get our taper through this 1/2-inch spacing. And what's going to be interesting is as I progress, I'm not going to do a 1/2 inch every time. The 1/2 inch is a reference. So I might stack this first line, and then I might go to a 1.5 lines. That would be 3/4 of an inch, and then a 1.5 lines, which would be 3/4 of an inch, and then a 1/2 and a 1/2, and then put it on the hook. So you can use that to make a more space, less space, less space, less space, and then you have the red markings even on the mono that go past the thread base to know where that first stack should be on the hook shank when you connect the two, and you can make this perfectly seamless, scaled up bucktail deceiver where the spacing was large, large, medium, 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 close, 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 and you're building all this bulk and density forward. So this, even though we've extended out the platform a considerable way to make, you know, a 7.5, 8-inch bucktail deceiver or whatever you're going to do, it still follows the exact identical format from the bucktail deceiver video where it was just on a hook shank. Start sparse. Start sparse. It's always a good rule of thumb. So I'm going to cut that off the hide, pack those butts in my hand, get that out of the vise. I'm going to take like a Giovanni pinch so that I can control all that slack, pull it right down onto that red zone, get 2 controlling wraps so there's just some tension on it. And now I can take my thumb, and I mean, this is identical technique. If you can do this on a hook shank, you can do it on the mono. I'm just going to work that around, get a nice even distribution using my pinch, pinch, pinch as it goes around in a circle to make sure that it's evenly distributed. Now my left hand here is going to become a vise. I'm going to lock that in place so I can suck all the slack out and lock those butts in. I'm going to put a few high tension wraps down, so a little bit of a thread base. Then I'm going to get my swing going so I have a perpendicular thread path, and then I'm going to wrap down those butts. Pull out the mono that you need, get it perpendicular, wrap it back. As every other stack, come in with a thin flash, like wing and flash, and just do every other and dress this so that your tail will be saturated with just fine sparkle that blends in perfectly with the bucktail, and you'll get this absolutely silhouetted movement fishing machine. And that should be your finished product after about 10 minutes or so, once you're fairly comfortable with the technique. But you got, look how big that is in my hand. You got like a 6-inch extended body bucktail deceiver tail that you can finish a bucktail deceiver or bulkhead on, or whatever you want to do for the head. And so for all you wondering, you know, maybe you're fishing peacock bass in Brazil, or you're on the East Coast and you want to fish stripers, and you're in love with the simplicity, and I mean, it's hard to beat fishing wise, bucktail deceivers and bulkheads. This is how you make them big without the craziest premium hair you can think of, but this is how you make a bucktail deceiver in that 6, 7, 8-inch class and get fishing. Then you're going to take your extended body rig once you got a little thread base down, and you're going to plop that right on top. And my favorite thing about these flies is there's no gap here. There's no transition zone. And what's crazy is once you get that locked in, I mean, you can see where my next stack is supposed to be if you were to keep that 1/2-inch spacing. It's way the heck up here. And so when I put that stack then right about here, I'm not way back by the bend, I'm not fighting the point or the barb, and then they can get tighter and tighter and tighter, following typical bucktail procedure, bucktail deceiver procedure as far as finishing it. And the result is a predator fly with a perfect silhouette, super easy casting, unbelievable movement that won't foul. It can't foul because this is nice and stiff, and of course I'm going to hit that with a little bit of glue right there. But that's the original extended body mono tying in hand. And of course, you can do it with the hollow fly technique, which is a beast.